they've made this commitment to come down and join us and tell us what is going to be happening in Florida and what kind of volunteer activities. You know, to reiterate, we are the grassroots volunteer team for Ted Cruz. And he has over 175,000 volunteers nationwide. There isn't anybody running for president who has a team like that. There isn't anybody running for president who has accumulated over 700,000 individual contributions to his campaign. So that's like folks like you and me, you know, giving what we can and certainly doing what we can as a volunteer. So Senator Hayes also represents portions of 4 counties, and that is, I make sure I got this right, Lake, Sumter, Orange, and Marion. Did I got that right? Oh, good.
To be woefully inadequate to express how much I deeply appreciate you being here. You folks are the ones that are going to make it happen. And candidly, I think we're in a desperate situation for the preservation of our republic. We absolutely have to work with a feverish pitch between now and March the 15th. That's less than 90 days. And we can do it, and we will do it by uniting together, reaching out to everyone in our circle of influence, no matter how large or how small that might be. All of our email addresses need to get the message. I'm for Cruz. I'm proud to be for Cruz. Please, please join us on Team Cruz for the preservation of our republic. It can't be overemphasized. I was so thrilled to hear that little one over there squall out a little while ago. It's for them that we need to do what we're going to be doing for these next 90 days. And then on beyond that. In my heart of hearts, I truly believe that by March the 15th, at the close of that voting, the Republican presidential primary, for all practical purposes, will be over. And I'm confident we can do that if we just get out and work as if it all depends on us, but pray knowing that it all depends on God.
Amen.
Amen. I'm going to tell you a George Bush story. I'm an avid reader. I'd much rather watch, much rather than watch any football program or any other program on TV. I'd much rather cuddle up with a good book and my sweet wife. This is, you talk about dedication. This lady, coming August, will have had the joy of being Mrs. Hayes for 50 years. Now she deserves some credit. Now that's a miracle, folks. Even my mother told us that she never expected it to last, but it has. She claims to be the wind beneath my wings, or some people tell her she's the hot air in my balloon. She's with me all the way. And she's the one that enables me to do what little bit of good I am able to do. But anyhow, I was reading the book God and George W. Bush. And in the book, the author tells how one Sunday morning, while he was governor of Texas, he was sitting in a worship service, and he just felt God calling him to run for the presidency, which he did. Fast forward now, I'm in Orlando. He's coming over to do a fundraiser. We have a photo op, and you know how they put an tape X, 2 of them side by side on the floor, and the honoree stands on one. You go, the lackeys go stand on the other. Well, as I went in and I reached out to shake his hand, and I looked him straight in the eye, and I said, Mr. President, I just want to thank you for answering the call that Sunday morning. Stood around, the camera went flash, and I started to leave, and he reached out and grabbed my arm and pulled me back toward him, and then didn't just shake my hand, but gripped my hand and looked me straight down and says, you don't know how much that means to me. I said, sir, I do too. Thank you. I must get us back on track. And there is no finer person on that stage in any of these debates than Ted Cruz to lead us there. He's got to lead from the heart. Anybody who has any experience in leadership at any level, whether it be at a high school club, whether it be a civic organization in your community, or anywhere else, they will tell you very quickly, if you don't have it in your heart, you're not going to be effective as a leader. And that's exactly the kind of man that we're behind, and that we need to share that message with the rest of the world. I have put together a list of talking points, and I'm going to share them with you. And I rarely read anything, and today's not going to be an exception to that. I'll throw in my editorial comments. I did not bring enough copies for everybody. I did bring 25 copies. Now, everybody I trust has signed up with an email address. I will email this to Betsy. She can then disseminate it, and you'll have an electronic copy. Please feel welcome to share it with anybody and everybody. The more people we can get this message to, the better off the whole nation is going to be. But I usually start out a presidential, if you want to call it that, conversation with a question. To ask the person with whom I'm speaking, are you happy with where America is today? And rarely does anyone say yes. If they do, I just turn and go somewhere else. I don't want to waste my time. They need more help than I can offer. But over and over and over again, the emphatic answer is no, I'm not happy. And so then the question is, okay, do you expect someone to change the direction of our country by going along to get along? Do you think someone in the establishment, so to speak, is likely to change? Let's look at their track record. You know, people have said for years, if you wanted to predict the future, know your history. And the history of these different candidates who are running needs to be examined. And I would invite anybody to dig deeply into Ted Cruz's history. Here is a man who campaigned on issues that were important to him and the people of Texas. And he went to Washington and he lived up to every one of those campaign pledges. What a concept. Behave as an office holder as you campaigned on. Those same principles. That's Ted Cruz. He has proven that he is an independent voice. He will call you out no matter whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, independent, or any other thing. The man is a principled man. And if you're acting in a way that is contrary to the best principles for this country, he's going to call you out on it. And that's what we have to have there. His independence is absolutely proven by his track record. National security. He clearly understands the need for our borders to be secure and for Americans to be protected everywhere they are, here and abroad. From a military standpoint, Ted recognizes that it's imperative that America have the strongest military. The manpower in our military today and the lack of supplies that they are going through today is inexcusable. Totally and completely inexcusable. And Ted is dedicated to restoring the health and the strength of our military men and women. It's morally wrong to ask a person to put their life on the line, endanger their lives, and not give them all the armament and all the technology and everything else and the support that they need to carry out their mission. Now, back when those of you who know that the calendar usually follows the color of the hair, recognize that I was there during the Vietnam era. I never served in Vietnam, but I was on active duty during that time here in the States. And Lyndon Johnson came up with this, I think, an absolutely abhorrent phrase called rules of engagement. Every time a target was identified, they had to call back and get permission to take it out. And unfortunately, that's been perpetrated from that point on. Let me tell you Ted Cruz's view of rules of engagement. Number one, he finds the experts that know what they're doing, called the military generals and admirals. He gives them the objective and says, go win. And make sure when you come back, that enemy never wants to tangle with you again. That's what's going to win wars. That's what's going to stamp out ISIS and all the other rabid Muslim terrorists. And that's the kind of man that we have who is dedicated to doing the right thing and empowering our military people to do what they know best how to do. And to that end, Ted is the kind of man who believes that he is not the only one in the room who knows anything. It's his obligation as a true leader to find subject matter experts, bring them together, build a consensus of where we need to be on this particular issue, that particular issue, and then follow their lead. And he's not to be expected to know all there is to know about anything. And you and I both know that anybody who thinks they are in that condition needs a lot more help and they have no position, no place in a leadership position. But he recognizes that there are subject matter experts upon whom he has to rely, and our military generals and admirals are some of those. What do you think about the trampling of the Constitution that we have seen in the last 7 or 8 years? It's abhorrent. Ted Cruz has a 15-year-old. Do we have anybody here that is, say, between 10 and 20 years old? No, Lena is 7. I guessed her age properly. No, she is it 6, sweetheart? That's right, 6. I guess 6. That's right. The little one over there, so he's maybe not even a year yet. But I mean, the important thing is, at 15 years old, Ted Cruz memorized the entire United States Constitution, and he went around to various civic clubs there in the Houston area where he was growing up, and was their program. He would write on a marker board the entire U.S. Constitution from memory. The man knows what a constitutional government is all about. And that's what it takes. And to that end, he recognizes that when a judicial vacancy occurs, it's imperative that he appoint to fill that position folks who also share his belief and his dedication to that guiding document, that founding document. He's going to appoint constitutionalists to the entire ladder of judicial succession. Not just wait until there's a Supreme Court vacancy, which we pray there will be several after next January, but he's going to appoint men and women to that bench that believe in the Constitution and are strict adherents to the Constitution. Integrity. To me, that is one of the fundamental traits of any person who seeks public office. And Ted Cruz has unquestionable integrity. He is a man who, it's just part of his core. And so we need to really impress people with his integrity as we go forward. In the book of Exodus, 18th chapter, the 21st verse, God told Moses, he says, "But select capable men from all the people, men who fear God, trustworthy men who hate dishonest gain, and appoint them as officials." Ted Cruz fits that description. That's the kind of man that we don't want somebody that's going to be a Casper milquetoast either. He's got to be a fighter. 9 different cases Ted Cruz has tried before the United States Supreme Court. There is no other member of Congress that can come anywhere close to that. The man is experienced, and he's a fighter, and he does not back down from contentious issues. I really, really wish that we could see the document that would have come from a negotiation with Iran if Ted Cruz were our president. First place, I really question whether there would have been any negotiation. I don't think there would be. But nevertheless, you can bet it wouldn't be this piece of worthless paper that we have now. The cases were defending, some of them were defending religious liberty, such as the World War I Memorial, the Mojave Desert Cross, and also the Ten Commandments display at the Texas Capitol. And then he took on the World Court to make sure that an illegal immigrant who had been sentenced to die in the Texas death chamber because of a murder out there was indeed executed as the court had declared. Money raising. No one's going to be successful in a presidential campaign if they're not successful in raising money. Trump is self-financing. We all know his deep pockets. They run all the way to the floor. But then the only other person who can come close to what Ted Cruz has done, or actually exceeds by a little bit, is Jeb Bush. And we know where Jeb Bush is in public opinion. You know, I'm not going to say anything more about that. And that brings me to another point. Folks, we don't need to go negative on the other candidates. We don't have to say a word that is not flattering about someone else. We need to take all our time and talk about the great attributes of our candidate, Ted Cruz. I think people are sick of that. And then we got to have somebody that's electable. Our man is definitely electable. When you see him in these debates and you see the little news snippets here and there, there's not a brighter person from an intellectual standpoint on that stage anywhere. And one of the beauties I think that Ted has is not only is he very intellectual, but he can communicate to common folks like me. I've seen a lot of people. As a matter of fact, I had an interaction with one of them just this week there in Tallahassee. Absolutely brilliant. But he leaves me about 30 seconds after he starts talking, because he's way up here. But Ted Cruz is right here with you and me. He can communicate. Very articulate and exceptionally bright and certainly electable. I don't know of anybody that is anywhere close to conservative American convictions that thinks our American government is at the proper size. Everybody I know talks about it being inflated, it's being bloated, it's, you know, we got. How many of you think that anything bad would happen if the Department of Education disappeared tomorrow? No. Interesting side point, if I may make it. I've been in the legislature, this is now my 12th session. Ever since I've come into the legislature, every time I've talked to an educator, whether it be a kindergarten teacher or a university president or anyone in between, I've said, name me one thing that would happen that would be unflattering or be a bad effect if the Florida Department of Education were abolished today. And literally, folks, out of all of those people with whom I've asked that question, only one has said anything other than nothing. And that person was a high school administrator who said, oh, I call them 2 or 3 times a week. I said, for what? And she said, to find out how to fill out their paperwork. Yeah. Oh, boy. How valuable an agency. Look at the billions of dollars. You can go back and look in the annals of last year's Senate session. I don't have the date. I can find it for you. But it took me 14 minutes and 28 seconds to get all that load off my chest on the floor of the Senate one day. And I gave them that example as well. We are wasting billions of dollars in the United States Department of Education. And you know, if it were a good product that we were getting, it might be excusable. But the abysmal condition of our educational system today tells me it's all for folly. And we've got to stop it. But Ted is dedicated to downsizing government, eliminating some of those cabinet level positions up there and their accompanying departments as well. I think our leader needs to set a good example in their personal lives as well as their professional lives and their political lives. And I would stand Ted Cruz right beside me and be proud to stand there and say, this is an example of the kind of person that we all should strive to emulate. He includes his family, his sweet wife and those beautiful daughters, Heidi and the 2 girls, on the campaign trail with him. I don't know how many of us saw Fox and Friends. It's been probably 3, 4, maybe a month ago. But Heidi was on there one morning And I'm telling you what, that lady knocked it out of the park. She really hit a grand slam that day. She herself, very bright lady, very articulate, and will be a model for all the young ladies in America to emulate as the First Lady of our country. And Ted just believes in family man. His professional record is unblemished. His personal life is unblemished. Folks, I can't thank you enough for standing up and stepping out. That's what it's going to take to make this country back into the country that she was intended to be. You can go back and look through biblical history. And thankfully, we still serve a God of the second chance. He chose the children of Israel, and speaking of Israel, we must stand locked arm in arm with that nation. Ted Cruz is all about standing with Israel. But look at how God blessed them abundantly beyond their imagination until they misbehaved. And then he withdrew his hand of blessing. They went through plagues, they went through famine, they went through all sorts of punishment because they disobeyed. Then they asked for forgiveness, and he restored that blessing, led them out of slavery. And then they were grumbling and grumbling, so they got to wander around for 40 years. And then they got their act together, and then he restored that blessing again and gave them that promised land. I say all of that simply to say, look at American history. His hand of blessing was here in the founding, and now it has been removed. The genocide that this country has engaged in for the last 40 years is spitting right in the face of God Almighty himself. And until we apologize and beg his forgiveness, he's going to continue, I think, to withhold that blessing. But with a man like Ted Cruz, we can right that wrong. We can beg forgiveness, and we can once again restore America to be that shining city on top, not just of the hill, but on top of the mountain. And I'm so heartened by the general who talked about, I believe it was General Colin Powell, who talked about how the only soil that America has retained in the countries that we have conquered has been the soil needed to bury our dead. That's the America that we all knew growing up, and that's the America the rest of the world deserves to know from our time forward. But it's up to us to get behind Ted Cruz, to reach out and grab everyone else that we can and help them understand why they need to support Ted Cruz to be our next president.